this whole wellness ecosystem, it's truly meant for your whole family. You're showing your young kids and your family that's maybe visiting out of town what type of lifestyle you live. It's inspirational, it's aspirational. You're proving that you can have everything at your home and never have to leave. The whole family can be healthy there.
Well, this is definitely a podcast I've been looking forward to for a while. So welcome, Kali.
Thanks, Brad. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. This is Kali Sudbrook, and she is with Beachside Custom Gyms. And I think your story is really interesting. I know you have an incredible background from, kinesiology and, fitness director at UC Irvine and the university world. You go out on your own. You've done some amazing things, incredible personality. It's like
my head's going to be this big one.
I'm serious. It's amazing. But I know you kind of teased me before we actually hit record, prepping for the episode. And, you have a university background. You come from that education side. You've come out into the business world, completely different, right? From the schooling, scholastic side to the real world of business. And you said you had an interesting take. So maybe we'll start there. What's that?
Well, first up, I want to point out the fact that you said it's a different world and the real world of business, because being in academia didn't feel like the real world. It was kind of shielded from a lot of stuff. I didn't learn business while I was there, even though I was a director of a massive university program. And it was great until it wasn't. So there's a lot of politics, just like any,
Right.
industry, I think, that goes on behind the scenes. But it's funny. So I taught at one university, which was my alma mater. And then I worked full time as a fitness director at a different one. And there were unique, similarities to both. But really what it boiled down to is they really don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I'm someone who I'm pushing for constant change. I want to improve everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want that. And so it came to a point where I loved my job and I loved it until I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I decided to leave. And, my wife was very supportive and she's like, you already know what you want to do. So I stepped into the remodeling world. And I think this is where you may have been confused, because we were talking offline. I started as doing, design and build, remodeling, that sort of a thing for any space. And then with my fitness background, I actually merged into just niching down completely into fitness and wellness spaces only, still with the design build. It's like a boutique design build firm, So it's like, that's all I focus on now. And so to kind of go back to the university setting, I'm very grateful for that, because it really set me up for dealing with all of my initial clients who are like, hey, I have this fitness space and we've worked together for years in the fitness space. Can you do a home gym for me? And I'm like, that sounds cool, So it was perfect. And it kind of queued me up for that. But I think, you talk a lot about this on the podcast of just the university and collegiate background and, should kids do that? Should we push our, I don't have kids, but, a lot of your guests do. I went to undergrad. I did my grad school. Like, I did everything. I worked at the university, and I would not push someone into going to college in this day and age.
Is that crazy?
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
It's it's funny, Kelly, as you're saying that. And I did college, like same as you. I did my bachelor's degree. I actually took the GMAT. I was going to go back and get my MBA. And so I've been through that experience. And it's funny how this has changed. And not to really spend too much time on this path, but I think, for you and I, our age, and it was just like, you have to go to college. You have to go to college.
Yep.
And, there's a lot of things how college has skyrocketed. But to your point, it's when you're in a classroom setting, look, there's a lot of benefit to understanding how to learn and how to understand and how to, memorize and
critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking. Yeah, I think outside about and like networking. And to your point, networking, right? You made some incredible contacts that you've leveraged since going on your own. So like the people aspect, the social side is great, but you can still learn that in business. I mean, it's in a way you kind of have to. And so when you're in a classroom, it's almost like you could solve the world's problems on paper. Yeah. Like you sit there and you're like, no, it's like it's black and white. Here's how it is. And then you go out there and you try to execute. Like it's no different than building. And I think where you can relate, I know that you're obsessed with pre-con. You're obsessed with like documentation. And we tell clients all the time, I'm like, we on paper we can communicate. We can go through these selections. We can put in a build a chart. We can get out there. but it still has to be executed. At the end of the day, sometimes it's not. And, it's just, the university, I'm glad you brought that up, because I just think that so many people don't realize the opportunity that's out there, and
And there's
not all
so
of us
much.
excel. Yeah. Yeah. There's
There's
so
so
much.
much out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And this is the thing, and sorry to cut you off. I just get so
No, I'm glad
excited
you
about
did. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
this stuff. But like you get to choose and you get to create your own reality, if you will, of like, people think construction is this one thing, right? But there's all these really cool offshoots to it that are really viable opportunities and career paths. And, there's all these subsets to the industry. It just is such an exciting world that once you step in, you're like, wow, like for me, I didn't realize all of this opportunity existed.
I'm glad you said that, because the thing is, Callie, is there's just not one box, even in construction. I mean, I had Ace Rodriguez on from Pickleball Kingdom, was one of my clients, and he's like,
I love it.
find that niche and like just double down and go at it. And that's what you've done. I mean, you've built this incredible brand, this incredible company. Growing pains. What did that look like? You have this incredible background from education. You're going out. You're like, I'm ready to conquer the world. You talk to your wife. She's like, hey, I support you. Go do it. And then now here's reality.
I mean, the reality is what you've echoed for a long time, this sentiment of there's always going to be growing pains, no matter what phase you're in, So like I am actively going through growing pains as we speak, and I think that's just, it has to
So
become
am
a
I.
normal, yeah, I know. See, I knew it.
Yeah.
But it's just a normal thing, right? It's just, if you're going to be in business, you're going to constantly be tackling something. It's just a Sisyphean task that you've signed up for, So it's just navigating that and constantly pivoting and figuring out, okay, that didn't work. And instead of dwelling on it, you just keep going,
So what made you pivot? You realized, of course, you have this incredible experience and background in fitness. You're incredibly fit. You're incredibly active. So your passion lines up with now where you're working. But you mentioned when you came out of the university, you were kind of dabbling in different spaces. When did you take the leap to say, I'm going to fine tune and really go after, the fitness space?
Well, I'm going to cue this up with something that you also talk a lot about, which is like mentorship and coaching and things like that, which I had done 2 fitness spaces, believe it or not, with like 2 former colleagues that, one still worked at the university. The other was like a longtime buddy from undergrad. And it still didn't dawn on me. And so I was talking on, with one of my coaches on like a coaching call, and she's like, tell me about what you've been working on. And I told her, and she's like, I guess I just lit up talking about it. And she's like, I think you might be onto something with this. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, have you thought about maybe like only doing fitness spaces and niching down into that? And I was like, I couldn't do that. I would never survive. How would that
Right.
pay the bills, And she's like, I urge you to just think about it. Just sit with it. And I was like, okay. So I thought about it for 24 hours, and something about it was just so scary and terrifying, but like exciting at the same time. I thought, I have to do this. And so the very next day, I went on my website, which I was still managing at the time by myself. I took down everything that was not fitness related, which at that point were only 2 spaces. And I
Wow.
said, this is all I'm going to do now. And I changed everything. And my wife was like, are you sure that's a good idea?
Yeah.
Because she's like safe, low risk, all the things. And I'm like the polar opposite. And so I did it, and I've never looked back. And it was the best decision I made for my business.
Well, it's hard to make that plunge. I mean, Ace said that. He said there's riches and niches, but it's like,
Yep.
it's hard when you're like, even if you know the space, looking back, when did you make this change on your website? You're still managing your website. You make this change. How long ago was that?
So I'm 3 years and 8 months into my business at this point, and that was at year
Incredible.
2.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did that change the trajectory of your business when you just said, this is the direction I'm going?
It was just sort of a relief, because that's all people were coming to me for at that point. And then I could, pick and choose what I wanted to work on. It's like I didn't really want to work on that, laundry room remodel, because it just didn't excite me. So I got to say yes to the things where it was like, I had a mentor. It's like, it's either a hell no or a hell yes. And so I only work on projects where I'm like, that's a hell yes.
See, it's so smart, because I was just at a conference in Park City not too long ago, and one of the architects was there, and they're like, in your life, you only have so many projects, was his thing. He's like, I want to work on projects that excite me. I want to work for great people. And in fairness, when you're starting your company, you're trying to figure out your lane, you're trying to figure out where your success is going to be and what you're good at. And,
Sure.
there's part of branding and reputation. And, you've really excelled at this, Callie, but I mean, you have to get to a point where you can build a brand, a reputation, and have a client base that you can pick these projects. You're like, hell yes, because if you're behind it, you're going to put energy on it.
Exactly. And that's when like the creativity flows, and it's like I really want to just over execute for these clients, because I genuinely care about the, not that I didn't care about the outcome of a bathroom or
Right.
a laundry room, but it's just,
Just different.
yeah, it's different. You get it. I mean,
Oh, trust me. It's if you're building a home gym and you're into fitness like you are, Callie, in incredible shape, like of course it's going to be like, yeah, this is a slam dunk. You stand behind it. What do you feel there's an advantage for you being in Southern California? You're close to Newport. You're in a great part of being in California, and I would say this post COVID, where we saw that hey, government can shut down gyms, and then what? Then what do you do? How
right.
does that change your client's perspective on wellness and you know I guess that opportunity for you to come in and build your business?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I missed the boat in some cases because I'm like, man, I wish I had been there for COVID doing my business at that
Right.
time with the niche that I'm in. But I'm really grateful, honestly, because it allowed me to kind of ease into it, survey what's going on, and like learn, like drink through a fire hose about business in general first before I really dived into the niche of fitness spaces. And so I think being in California is a unique position. I'll put it that way because yes, there's tons of money, there's beautiful weather, people are fit, they're happy, like it's a great place to be because people don't need to be bought into the idea, like, or sold on
Hmm.
it, I should say. Like they're already bought in, they already know they want to be fit, they're living an active lifestyle. But what I will say is our challenge here is space. So
Yes.
we
Right.
don't have these sprawling estates like you guys have in Arizona.
Right.
And you guys just had Stu on from DivFit. I mean, he has these like massive estates as well where there's just lots of land, and so you can really get creative in terms of like a spatial and like size component. Whereas in California, a lot of our projects are, hey, we have a finite space to use. How can we fit a gym in here? And it gets tricky, and you have to be super creative and kind of think outside the box sometimes, which I actually really love. So it's a unique challenge for me because I get to maybe do some different things that maybe they don't have the wow factor sometimes that like the sprawling estates have, but it's fun for me because I get to just, I don't know, like I stay up at night sometimes thinking about like, how am I going to solve this issue, so yeah.
See, I love that, and I want to come back to the remodel side and your creativity. But when you're thinking new build specifically, and it doesn't have to be a new build, maybe it's a space that they're designing on a renovation, so you may be landlocked to the size of the room. But
Right.
what should clients be thinking about? Where does that strategy come in with you to understand how? What is their workout regimen, right? How are they going to be using it? What kind of equipment? How much thought goes into that coordination of designing that space?
You would be shocked how much goes into it. So, okay, I kind of put it in two buckets, right? There's the remodel side, which
Hmm.
I would say makes up about 50% of our clientele. And then there's the new build custom home side, which, I'm getting from designers, architects, other builders, things like that. So we've really stepped into that space this year. And so we're working on a lot of projects right now that haven't even made it to the website because like they're just still in process, right? But there's a whole host of, not, I don't want to say issues, but different situation with like a new build. For example, in Newport, we're building up and down
You're
at the
right.
same time. So
Hmm.
we're building into the basement, into the land. So we're digging out, and so you're thinking of things like, okay, there's maybe not a window down here. So what do
Right.
we do in that? Because in a workout space, you want to have natural light. You want to have maybe some biophilic design. So there's actually this is not a pitch, but it's just like I'm always thinking of solutions, right? So there's these screens called Liquid View. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they put them in a lot of like hospital settings where there's no windows, and they
Hmm.
change. It's like this 24-hour long video basically that changes with like the rhythm of the circadian rhythm, the light outside, and kind of dictates that. So you can make it feel like this basement fitness space because that's all the space that we have when you're going 4 stories up. to make it feel like you're outside still. So like there's things like that that you have to think about. And then like, let's say from the remodel side, you're limited by ceiling heights and,
Mm-hmm.
just there's so many things that you can move because people think, oh, a home gym's going to be $10,000. It's like, no. Especially if you want it to function the way you want it to function,
Yeah.
you're going to have to be moving a lot of things, maybe moving a water heater out of the garage, creating tankless outside instead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like so much that goes into it. And so people think like, oh, I'm just going to put this equipment in here. Well, you really have to know, what are my power needs? There's a lot of tech equipment out there in terms of fitness stuff now. There's the OxFit, there's the tonal, there's all these things. I don't want to just plug it in on the side of the wall over here. I want it hidden behind that unit. So
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much forethought that goes into it that you think of like how much uh, goes into executing a kitchen design. I would say it's equivalent to that.
So, how hard has that been for you to advertise? Look, clients are going to spend time in their bathroom, their kitchen. Why they should give the same attention to detail, or that you should give the same detail as those spaces?
I don't think for me it's hard to advertise because I believe it, I live it.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to think that way, but I know that when push comes to shove and people have a finite budget,
Hmm.
obviously the kitchen and the bathroom and the rest of the house is going to go first. So, and that's to be expected. You want your whole family to be comfortable, but where I'm coming from is like the fitness spaces, the gym, the sauna, the cold plunge, everything, this whole wellness ecosystem, it's truly meant for your whole family. Like you're showing your young kids and your family that's maybe visiting out of town what type of lifestyle you live. It's inspirational, it's aspirational. You're proving that you can have everything at your home and never have to leave, and like the whole family can be healthy there. And that's, I think, a really powerful thing.
See, I love that. And you touched on this. I think what's incredible, and this probably just kind of showcases your experience where, when you're first starting, you may not be thinking about, not that you didn't, but I'm saying people in general, you mentioned the tonal, the backing that has to get put in. You mentioned going to tankless water heaters, the mechanical design, thinking about like sound, right? How are we going to block, sound from other spaces, dropping weights or,
Yep.
playing music, all these different elements that go into the building science of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so yeah, you touched on insulation. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit, right? Because you
Mhm.
immediately think gym, there's going to be noise, there's going to be sound, but so there's the building science side of the products, so the rock wools and the safe and
Mhm.
sound and things like that you would put in the walls and the ceiling and whatnot. But then there's also fitness related products that you would use to minimize and, dampen sound and things like that. So if you're a weightlifter and you're dropping weights, and the concrete, is dropping on the concrete, that's going to reverberate through the whole house if you're on a slab, right? But there's platforms actually that have sound deadening properties. So you drop this huge heavy barbell and it makes no sound whatsoever. So it's kind of juggling both of these things, right? It's like the building science side of things, of how a building is supposed to work properly, the building envelope and everything, the wall assembly, and knowing what product is going to be appropriate for that client, their needs, how they work out, all the things, right? But yeah, I mean, I could talk so long on like the building science side of things. I don't know if it would, like, me geeking out would bore people to death, but
Not at all. I mean, it really comes down to, for anyone listening, I mean, how early should you be integrated, right? To be thinking about this on a new build. A renovation might be a little bit different depending on,
sure.
if you're coming in, but if there's another GC involved that you're coordinating with, or a client, like, how ideally for you, what does that scenario look like for pre-con?
I know every trade and every designer and every architect is going to say this, but like as early as possible, because I'm working on two different custom projects right now where I'm like, if I could have just come in during the, like, before framing, we could have moved this door over and then we would have had room for an entire rack and a barbell. But now we
Hmm.
don't, because it's in the middle of a doorway and I can't move that rack anywhere else in the space. So who was really valuable to me and sort of learning this and realizing that I was actually really good with the spatial component of a fitness setup was Tammy Faulkner. So I actually
Oh,
did.
no way.
Yeah, so I was on a panel with her at IBS, and I was like, I just loved her. We talked a lot before the show, and I went to one of her other talks while we were there because I'm like, we're buddies now, and
Hmm.
she was talking about all the spatial things that flow into a room, and I'm like, this is what I do, but for like
Hmm.
fitness spaces, and so I really emphasize this spatial flow and how door swings, windows, just everything can really, you can manipulate those things in such a way to where it either helps the fitness space or it hinders it. So it's pretty cool.
I love that you brought that up because I think this is a space that often gets overlooked. And in some ways, I think interior design gets overlooked. That's changing. I think, to your point, the community, people listen. I mean, builders are becoming softer and understand the value of interior design. They've been so grumpy for so long. But the point being is, when you have, for the interior, when you have a good furniture layout and you can understand, okay, these are, sofas, sectionals, end tables, beds, right? You're designing windows around that. You're designing floor outlets, whatever
Yes.
it may be, um, all these different things really come into play because you have a good furniture design. Well, the gym is no different. Like you have to lay it out. Like anyone that's been to a condensed gym, like a commercial gym that you can't move around and operate, it's very frustrating.
Yep.
And so if you can design that and really lay it out to your point, hey, I can't have the door there. Where are we going to put the racks? Where are we going to put this? It just adds so much value because your furniture design is just as impactful to the overall architecture of the home.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny too because I'm working with a client right now out in Montana on a custom home where they have these expansive windows looking into this beautiful view of the lake, right? And originally, and no shade to the original designer or architect, but they just, people don't know. So they have the treadmill and the bike facing out of these gorgeous windows, which is, I would probably want that as well. But when I talked to the client who's actually going to be using this space, he wanted a TV in the space. I said, well, when you're on the treadmill and on the bike, would you prefer to be looking out at your view or at your TV? And he said, well, probably the TV. You know? And he said, I want to be by the view so I can, enjoy
Yeah.
it and like have the sun coming through. So I said, okay, well, we have to redo some things here. So I would have arranged the room slightly differently
Hmm.
knowing that information. But like, obviously I was brought in after the fact,
Right.
you know? Yeah.
It's such interesting advice, though, Kelly, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking for me, I was at a conference in Miami. This is right before COVID. And we were staying at this hotel and they had
The
this gym, of
coverings,
course. What's that? No,
coverings.
this wasn't coverings. It was for the Lux Magazine, Lux Awards,
Oh,
the Red
nice.
Lux Awards.
Nice.
And we're in Miami and we're saying, I think it was at like the W or something. And they had this incredible, I mean, it's just amazing view, right? All windows looking at the beach, like you're looking down. But even as great as that view was, if you're running on a treadmill or elliptical, sometimes you're like, you know what? I just need headphones on and see a TV. I don't mind that that's there, maybe a drop down TV or something, because in some ways I can only stare at the beach for so long as
Yeah.
I'm working through this like, high impact workout.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's things like that that people just don't recognize, and especially if you're not in a lot of fitness spaces. I mean, I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many gyms I've stepped foot in, from the university to training on my own to just everything, right? Because I geek out on that stuff. But it's like you start to realize what works and what doesn't. And so I can literally walk into, let's say, like a hotel gym and be like, and no shade, like not trying to, talk
That's
down on
terrible.
anybody. But yeah, you walk in and I'm like, I can tell that someone with zero fitness experience whatsoever designed this space.
Hmm.
So
It's funny because as a builder, like every time I go into spaces or homes, not to
see,
be critical and I don't say anything, but you
yeah,
notice it. Like I
yeah,
notice everything because that's what you do.
yep.
And
You can't help
how
it.
is you can't help it. And so for you, Kelly, education's continuing. You're always looking ways to better your craft, right? How does that change as you're in different hotels, commercial environments, other people's gyms? Looking at your business today, I know it's only been 3 years to maybe 3 years ago. How has that spatial awareness, how has that understanding of construction and building science changed, the impact for what you're designing now for your clients?
Um, I don't know that it's changed per se. I just think it's been refined so that I understand kind of where people are going to be meeting me at, with like maybe a limited understanding of how the space needs to be presented versus tweaks that I would make and what I'm probably going to be faced with. Like I can almost anticipate those things, just like you can probably walk into plans and anticipate, you know what, we didn't think of this. We need to add that, and this needs to go over here. It's just you kind of get like a sixth sense for it.
So again, now touching on this aspect, okay, so now that you've had some business experience, you have the education side, the academia, do you feel that there are other classes you should have taken or may have taken, knowing that at some point you go out on business on your own?
Oh, 100%. So, okay, actually, before I answer that, I've only told a few people this, but I went to undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, but before that, I
Uh-huh.
actually transferred from a community college because I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. And
Right.
so I took an interior design class, like one of my
No
very
way.
first classes. Yeah. And
No way.
I loved it. I thought it was the most fun thing, but my teacher was awful. And I kind of think I got a bad taste in my mouth. And so it kind of turned me away from it. But I'm like, imagine if I had had an amazing professor for that class.
Yeah.
My trajectory may have been very different. But
Wow.
but yeah. So I totally lost my train of thought. What was the question? It
No,
was
but essentially I was asking if there were different classes you were going to take in
oh
college that would prepare you more for business. But to your point,
yeah,
to touch on that, yeah, I mean, if you actually would have a good professor or teacher, who knows, you could be an interior designer, not even in the fitness side, just,
right.
do interior design.
But I'm very grateful for my path. It's been so much fun. It's been a blast. But yeah, I definitely would have focused more on the business side of things. I just think that's what well, I don't want to speak for anybody else but myself, but I think that's what a lot of us lack. Me in particular,
Mhm.
I didn't have a good stronghold on the finances. I didn't really know how to structure the business, and it's just been like a constant learning curve, And I'm part of a lot of groups, so I stay kind of within the fitness world. I've got those fitness groups and fitness professionals that I, kind of connect with. And then I've got the design side. So I've got the Interior Design Society of Orange County in LA. I'm really connected with them, go to all the events. And then I've got the building science side of things and all the contractors and builders. And so it's like I kind of keep my foot in all these things because they all pertain to what I do. And it also just makes it really fun because I get to network and talk to lots of different people.
So, and you mentioned that, like, you've been very attracted to masterminds and to, people that have been successful in business. Was that natural? Do you feel that came from your university background? I mean, what gave you the head start to jump on that?
No, I think I've just always been like really keen on noticing excellence in other people and then wanting to learn from that, and just I got taught by a mentor early on, like if you're ever going to ask for something from somebody else who's like maybe ahead of you or higher up or whatever, you're asking for help or whatever, to add value. So like whatever,
Mhm.
however that looks, like it could be in the form of gifting, it could be in the form of providing something that they need, like, hey, do you need something designed for you or whatever, like just add value in any way that you possibly can. And I just think that's really gotten me far because I don't go out just expecting like take, to take, right. I always want to give value wherever I can, but also take from them what I need to learn
Right.
to, like, be better. So I just think I've always been that way.
How do you do that? I think it's the best advice possible. I think, Callie, to come in and bring value, whatever that is. What did you find that you would bring to the table early? Because when you're going to the mentor asking about different ways to run your business, or maybe you're asking about how to estimate or schedule or, social media, who knows what it is, right? You're young in your career. So it's like, how do I bring value to someone's maybe more established? Like, what advice would you give to someone that may be in that, tough spot of trying to understand how to do that?
I think, like, okay, let's take this podcast for an example, right? You've taken the time out of your day to invite me on this podcast and have a conversation with me for an hour out of your insanely busy day. You're Brad Leavitt. So, it's like for me, uh, my duty to you is, let's say all the content that you put out after this podcast, I'm going to
Mhm.
share it like hell because that's the least I can do. So that's me adding value to the equation of saying, hey, you've put in all this time and effort. I'm going to do the same wherever I can. So it's stuff like that where I mean, I haven't maybe done anything, but I've just given that respect, to acknowledge how much work you've put into this as well.
Well, and in fairness to that, I think it's a phenomenal answer. I mean, you mentioned that you were going to speak on a panel with Tammy Faulkner, who I've worked with. She's a great designer. She did a house with us here
Yeah.
in Phoenix, but she was speaking and you went to her event, right? I mean, I think that's unique about you is it's very genuine. It's very authentic. Like truth be told, for what it's worth, Callie, like you made such an impression. I mean, we're on this group text thread
Yeah.
because, Mark's put together this Costa Rica trip and Callie's like, she just like, you are definitely like motivating to everyone, like commenting, like you're enthusiastic. And I'm like, I mean, this lady's like powerful, like she's killing it. So it's like, I think some people are very unique in that you understand your strong suit and your personality and how that energy you have and how that can make an impact on people. And there's different ways you can do that, even if you have the experience. But I'm saying someone who may not have that, can offer different things to impact them.
Sure. It's funny, total sidebar, but my name is so in Celtic it means energy. And I
Oh,
think
no
like
way.
there's something about the naming
Yeah.
convention when we're born that like we
Yeah.
live up to our name. So, I'm sure if we looked up Brad, it would be, godlike or something,
Yeah, right.
like
That's crazy. No, but what's funny is, to your point, I struggled early on. You go to these networking events and you're like, how do I go talk to people? Like I'd see like Callie over there and I'm like, okay, she's really successful. Like I'd love to like work with her in this space. Like what do I say? And, I watched other people young in their career and they go to these events and they would be very targeted. They'd already know about you, Callie. They'd go up and say, Callie, I saw that you were published in Lux Magazine, or, I saw that you had this article. I see that you're doing this gym and you do this incredible project, hashtag whatever it is. And so showing that you have interest, like automatically breaks down that barrier instead of walking up being like, hey, like I'm so and so. And you'd be like, okay, whatever. But when someone is, giving you some authentic, the flowers, if you will, just like
yeah.
kudos for like work you're done. And like, it makes an impact. I've seen people do that to me and others. And it's like, I'm like, oh, that's a great, way to do an icebreaker.
Yeah, I mean, I had another mentor tell me earlier on too. Like it's kind of like dating. Like it's like friendly dating. Okay, so you want to get to know as much as you can about that person, right? And you want to ask questions about them, and you want to show interest. And it's not just like you're showing interest, because you have to or whatever, but like genuinely finding those threads, those commonalities that really excite you about that person. And it's showing, like you said, that you're enthusiastic about their journey and wanting to know more. I mean, that goes so far, so far.
How's it been for you, Callie, now, as you think of your ideal client, business development from marketing strategies, where are you finding your leads? Are they coming to you? Are you working through other general contractors like designers, architects? Where do you find most of your lead generation coming from?
It's changing actually, because I think there's a natural progression of your business, right? Like you're serving a certain subset of, or a certain demographic, right? A certain earning potential, if you will, and then you kind of work your way up, So I'm kind of in that mode of working my way into sort of this next tier of clientele, builders and architects, which I haven't been working with up until now, and so it's really exciting. And it's the game is changing, but I think it's honestly become easier because I'm speaking the same language. I'm still working with the client. I have basically two clients. I have the builder and the client, or I have the designer and the client,
Mm-hmm.
which poses
That's
uh,
tough.
yeah, there's pros and cons to it, of course,
Yeah.
but I just think I value those relationships with the builders and the architects, and it's like I have fun because I can just totally geek out and nerd out about all these things, and go off on these tangents and have a lot of fun talking about these cool things that we're working on. That I don't get that with just the client only, but I'm never going to turn my back on that because I still genuinely do love servicing the homeowner. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's value in that as well. So it's turned into, that was like my primary client, was just the homeowner, and now
Mm-hmm.
I've got maybe one homeowner project. I've got a couple other builder projects that are design and build, and then I've got several other that are just design only, remote design, in-person design, whatever. So it's really it's just evolving, just like any business does.
It's incredible. Do you feel, because you're very knowledgeable in the building science aspect, how is that giving you an upper hand when you're working with contractors that can be very territorial?
I don't I don't know how to answer this. This is not, and I'm not saying this to be negative. I don't think that it has given me an upper hand in any way, shape, or form, to be honest. And the reason why I say that is because it's not sexy. Like building science isn't like something
Yeah.
tangible, you know? So like, and I think the builders that I've worked with, they haven't been territorial. So I haven't really had to navigate that so much. And I kind of just go in like, you're going to like me. So, you know, and we're going to speak the same language and it's going to be fun. So, I don't go in with like this, I don't know, this worry that, I don't know, it's going to be difficult or challenging, you know?
What do you see clients looking for from equipment? You know, whether it be workout equipment, fitness equipment, whether it be wellness stuff, you know, cold plunges, saunas. What are you seeing the demand for right now?
Everyone's on the cold plunge and sauna kick, of course.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to equipment, I would say there's what people want, and then there's the things that people don't know that they want, or that they don't even know it exists. You know, so like that's my job to know everything out there that exists, and for each price point and each style and each aesthetic, and kind of like I need to know what's going to suit their needs and their fitness style and everything. So every single client that comes to me, I'm going to suggest probably something slightly different depending on what their needs are, you know? So I'm brand agnostic. You know, I don't stand by just one sauna or cold plunge, or,
Hmm.
you know, if I have to use Peloton or Rogue in another gym, like I want to poke my eyeballs out because I'm like, there's so much more out there. And
Yeah,
not
yeah,
to
yeah.
say that there's anything wrong with that equipment. It's just, that's like, it's like I tell people, for as many faucets and fixtures and finishes that
Hmm.
you can imagine, there's probably just about the same. I mean, maybe not as much, but it's a similar setting to like all the fitness equipment that exists out there that people just don't know that is out there, you know?
Yeah. So how does that, you know, when you're intake, you know, thinking about that, what does that intake look like for you when you're vetting a client? And let's just say, you know, budget's there, timeline's there,
Sure.
project, but now it's like the real nuance of designing something that they're going to like and be happy with. Ha, you know, what are some of the questions you're asking them to understand what their fitness regimen looks like, how experienced they are with, you know, because they may not even know what they want.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's funny because I feel like people give me answers that they think I want. You know, it's like, oh, well, we want the Peloton and we want, you know, a dumbbell set. And my favorite is kettlebells because they're actually called kettlebells.
Kettlebells.
Yeah. So I think they give me just like generic answers. And so it's my job to kind of tease out what they've said versus what the vibe that I'm getting that they want, based on how they work out, how they look. You know, if they say, oh, I do high rocks, okay, cool. I'm going to design that completely different for like a high rocks type facility than I am for someone who's going to do Pilates, obviously, you know, two
Right.
completely different. But like, I wish I could say it was like very scientific and, you know, I have this regimented question set. It's like, I kind of just feel it out. I mean,
Hmm.
I know that sounds weird, but it's like I've just been doing this for so long that, from like a fitness perspective, that I kind of know what they're going to want. And so I'll give them basically, hey, this is what you've asked for. But I think there might be some options to look into or explore these other things over here. And so kind of maybe showing them things that they didn't know existed and kind of get them, wow, okay, well, that's really cool. I didn't know that even was a, you know, a possibility. So it's just giving them what they want, but then also surprising them with some other things that they haven't thought of.
How difficult was sourcing, maybe from the early beginning and now? What I mean by that, setting up vendor relationships, you know, having access to, you know, the fitness equipment, you know, that I would imagine probably like in the furniture world, there's minimums that you have to hit for certain tiers of pricing and multipliers. But even outside of that, like you mentioned there's so much opportunity. There's so many different brands and manufacturers.
Yeah.
You really have to stay in front of it to know what's out there and aware, but you also have to build relationships of what you know companies are going to perform and sell to you and say, okay, Kelly, like, yeah, we're going to service you.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it comes down to I go to all the trade shows and conferences where they're actually showcasing equipment. So there's a
Hmm.
couple in the fitness world. There's one called HFA. There's a big one in Germany that I really want to go to called FIBO. And there's, you know, all of the European companies out there. So it's also, I would say how my knowledge has grown is I started off, and also I will say I had a leg up. So working at the university, we would buy equipment all the time: Technogym,
Mm-hmm.
Woodway, Hammer Strength, all the big ones, right? All the big collegiate type of brands. So I already had relationships with these vendors, and I've had them for 15, 20 years now. So that was kind of the easy part. Where it got difficult is realizing, oh my gosh, like just like everything, there's the university and sort of collegiate world of equipment, and there's everything outside of it that's more of like the designer and luxury type of equipment that I had to create vendor relationships with. So, it's kind of layering on to the knowledge that I already have.
That's incredible. And, those relationships, I mean, having the experience you had makes, a big difference because so much of it is that relationship side. I know that you have a workout app for builders,
I do.
called Built to Last. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, contractors and people who have been injured on the job,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a very near and dear to my heart type of topic, because when I left UCI, I was running a program called Work Strong, and it was for anyone on campus who was an employee who had been injured on the job. And most of them were guys in facilities, law enforcement, nurses, people
Yeah.
that were just using their bodies all day, every day, and pretty much just banging them up, and feeling pain and hurt every single day, but they don't really have a way to fix it. And so it was really cool. We put them through a program for free, which was free personal training, free dietitian counseling, and free massage therapy. And I'm like, who wouldn't want to sign up for that? But we were actually banging down people's doors on campus, like, hey, you're eligible for this program, come do it. So I think that always just kind of stuck with me. And my wife is in law enforcement. She's a police officer. And so she deals, a lot with just the physicality of that, just the burden of that. And so I created the app because I just can't get away from that aspect of fitness. And I love it so much and I'm really knowledgeable about it because we've all
Mm-hmm.
had injuries. We've all had to come back from something where something got tweaked or you're in pain for whatever reason and you can't explain why. So I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to provide a service to the industry where, like, I'm not making any money off of this thing. It's so dirt cheap, but it's just a program that you can follow with minimal equipment that's going to keep you healthy. And, there's a difference between like going to CrossFit and like blasting your body, and no
Mm-hmm.
shade thrown to CrossFit. I think it's a great tool for certain people, but there's also something to be said about moving your body in functional ways for the type of work that you do, and being like, to create like a protective mechanism, and almost like insurance is what I call it, through movement. Like you're creating insurance on your body that it's going to last longer and you're going to have that longevity in the industry. So
I love that you touched on that. It's funny how you see these things evolve because, um, for so many years, I mean, down here, there's a workout facility at our office, right? And they do a lot of unique strength training because your joints can only take so much, right? Pressure. I mean,
right.
you're going to speak to this better than I can. As you get more muscular, like your joints can only take so much. But you see these NFL players doing Pilates, right? You see
Yep.
them doing yoga and stuff because there's different movements that add a lot of strength to your core and your body that you don't just need to go out and bench press every day.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many other things available in terms of implements and tools and training things that you can utilize in your workout program, that like you don't need to be crushed walking out of a workout every single day. You have to be smart about it. That's all.
So how often are you still? I know that you're in the construction side and you have the app. Are you still coaching in a way? Are you still involved in the fitness industry at all?
No, I'm not in like coaching or I don't train clients anymore.
Hmm.
That's kind of like, I call that like my past life.
Hmm.
But I'll always be tied to it in the sense that I'm going to these trade shows and conferences, and just kind of keeping my ties to that, because eventually there's a lot of coaches who are in these organizations and trainers who are going to be my client one day, or they're going to
Right.
have an athlete who's going to be my client. And so just kind of keeping those doors open.
Are you seeing more families invest in kids sports and gyms for their kids?
Absolutely. Actually, I was going to flip that on you and see
Oh,
if people, because I know from a building side, like you're
Mhm.
dealing with the whole family, right? Like you're
Yeah.
creating spaces in that house for every single member of the family. I know I'm seeing it. I'm curious if you're seeing it too. Parents with the young kids in sports and all the things.
Yeah, it's actually a big thing. It's funny because I can't think early in my career, and again, not that people are cold plunging and doing saunas, but it's pretty rare you put that stuff in,
Sure.
to now. I mean, there's all kinds of different wellness things you could be putting into the home. I mean, there's the options are endless,
Yeah.
and that's becoming very prevalent. But specifically to your question, we have a client right now, a project, and their kids are incredibly athletic, and they're involved, and we're putting, batting cages in. We're designing like a whole. We're working for a few baseball players. I think what's unique about Arizona is there are a lot of athletes that retire here. And shockingly, there's a lot of hockey
Oh,
players here, right? So there's a lot of people from the NHL. They get
yeah.
tired of those winter months in Canada and they live here. And so, like, the hockey scene is incredible here, which is kind of shocking because I
That
grew up in
makes
San
sense
Diego. I'm
though.
like, no one plays
Yeah.
hockey in San Diego,
I
but
know.
it's Scottsdale. There's a bunch of these NHL guys that live up there. But point being is, there's a lot of baseball, there's a lot of football, there's a lot of hockey, and so, I think, not just from the lucrative standpoint, but they see, scholarships and they see opportunity for their kids in different ways. And, I mean, you were in the fitness arena, Kelly, you kind of touched on this, like your client base that you have is driven from your experience of working with people through fitness. There is something to be said about, when you're in the fitness space, when you're in the sports space, if you're in the golf space, there's connections, there's opportunities, there's, a lot of people that are successful in those fields are very active. And
Right.
so being in those lines, and the parents see the value of that. If anything else, they want their kids to be active. And so we are seeing, and again, we have a little bit more land than you do,
Yeah.
in Southern California. And I know it very well since I grew up there. But yeah, it's becoming much more common and prevalent than it was in the past.
Yeah. It's wild. I had a family just last week reach out to me. They have 4 boys under the age of 14. They're all in travel baseball. And so
That's
they're like,
crazy.
"We need a gym in our garage."
Yes,
And I'll be honest, I don't love doing garages, but sometimes that's literally the
you have
only
to.
space people have left here?
Yeah.
So you
Well,
try
it's
and
hard in California. It's
yeah,
hard
I
in
mean,
California.
I try and make it an extension of the home so that it doesn't feel like, ugh, you're walking into the garage. You're walking into like this really cool performance space, and you make it work. But yeah, it's crazy. 4 kids. I'm like, I don't know how they do it. All the travel schedules. How is that possible?
Especially with travel baseball. I mean, I trust me, my son played baseball. I know what baseball is unique. I think here, as the kids get into tackle football too. I mean, it's 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, games on Saturday for these young kids. And then,
Yeah,
baseball's like 4 or 5 times a week, 2 games a week. I'm like, it's like,
seriously.
I'm like, I still have other kids have a job. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable the demand it takes, in that space.
I know. It's wild.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, that are looking to start a business and go on their own, especially if they are leaving the education world?
I can't take credit for this saying. It was I swear I have like 1,000 coaches and mentors. It's just I've got a lot of people in my corner, which I'm grateful for. But she said, "Messy action is better than inaction." So
Mhm.
I've really tried to take that to heart. Where it's like, you know what, a lot of what I'm doing right now isn't perfect. My systems they need to be tightened up, and I recognize where I have holes and gaps and things like that. But you know what? It's better than waiting 5 years and going, I'm going to do this when I'm ready, because you're never going to be ready? So
Mhm.
I would say that, yeah, messy action is better than inaction.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, because if you don't get started, if you don't take the plunge, then what else?
Yeah. I mean, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your life.
How has social media played a role in success you've had?
Oh my gosh. It has literally catapulted me through this trajectory of business ownership. I've met so many amazing people, mostly mentors, other just super talented individuals. And what's crazy, kind of going back to like the university setting, right? You'd think working at a university, I was working with some like really crazy smart people. And certainly there were those people there. But working with builders and tradespeople and contractors, designers, everyone is so freaking smart and like super talented. And I'm like, where were all of you when I was working at the university? Well, you
Yeah.
certainly weren't working there, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's just wild, and you've talked about this on your podcast before, like contractors and builders, and we kind of get a bad rap, right? But
Mhm.
there's so much that you have to know about all these different things all at one time. And you have to manage people and have high emotional IQ and just all the things that play into it. It's impressive.
The emotional IQ, I think, is something that I've really gained a lot of respect for over the years. And that appreciation for. And
Sure.
what I mean by that, it's so like your job, Callie. When you're out there managing a project, and you know this from doing it, there's a fine line because you have to be very assertive, right? And you have to really, you can't be a pushover. And
Right.
so you have to be direct. At the same time, you can't be an a-hole to somebody. Let's say you got to treat them with kindness. So there's
Yeah.
this fine balance to get stuff done, but be assertive, but still have this gentle side. And it's really tough, whether you're the superintendent or project manager or coordinator or interfacing with the client. You have these really unique, from the trade partners to suppliers to the clients. I mean, all these different parties, and they all have different expectations. And to tie those together and be the quarterback of all of it, it's a lot harder than people understand.
Oh yeah, and there's so many. I mean, emotion plays a part. Hunger plays a part.
Yes.
How people are showing up. But you know what? Honestly, prepped me the best for it was number one, teaching. Like in a class, you have to lead the class, right?
Mhm.
Everyone's got a different personality coming in, and then coaching clients. Like I'm literally bossing people around every day, and they're paying me to do it. So it's like I'm not a bossy person, but it's like I just know how to take control of a situation and say, this is what we're going to do. Let's go.
And it's funny how you speak about just the knowledge side. I would agree with you. I remember, and a lot of it's just, stigma, perception, stereotype, whatever. When I was in high school, and I was accepted to college, and I'm going to do construction management. I was home for the summer playing basketball. And some of the kids were asking me, "Oh, what are you doing?" From high school. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just home for the summer." They're all, "You're going to college for construction? Like, what's your problem?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's for like the kids that drop out of high school. Like, what are you doing, kind of thing.
Right.
But the funny thing is I've worked in high school in San Diego, and like when you see, uh, you know, I did electrical, but whether it be electrical, whether it be concrete, whether it be steel, I mean, framing. Like if you see the math that goes into framing, trim carpentry, it's unbelievable. Like someone you don't think construction's hard to go build a set of stair stringers and make sure it's per code, and
Seriously.
you're factoring in what the ground floor is to, especially on a multi-floor unit, 2 or 3 stories, right? And
Yeah.
it's much more complicated, and there's a lot more math, but it's practical stuff, and you don't realize being around that. And again, to your point, not only do you have to understand the technical side, but then there's the physical labor, and there's understand scheduling and supply chain and cash flow, and then dealing with the end customer, right? There's so many
Sure.
different angles.
And I wish in school if they would have just given me like a story pull or learned fractions on a tape measure, I would have nailed it. But I was trying to do it on paper with numbers. I'm like, I don't get
Right.
this.
I know.
So
Because it's not practical, but
no.
the tape measure is more practical. Although I think we should go to metric and get away from.
Yeah, I know a lot of people push for that. I would love it because it makes it simple. But
Yeah.
okay, I know you're going to have some questions at the end here, but
Yeah.
I want to design your gym on paper. Let's say,
Okay.
so this is what I would put in your gym, just knowing you. So
Yeah.
I would definitely put in all angles of bench press. So incline, decline, and flat. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would put in a belt squat so that you can protect your back. You can,
That's better.
load
Yeah.
up the quads, like to go really, really heavy without straining anything. You're definitely not a cold plunge person, or
No, I am.
oh, you are.
I actually, yeah, I probably haven't told you that, but I actually cold plunge almost every day.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, okay, I'm
But
definitely.
you haven't interviewed me yet, so that
I know, right?
serious.
All right. Well,
I just did last night, actually. I do it I'll go tonight too.
Dang. Okay. Well, you threw me on that one, threw me for a loop. I'm thinking like California, Arizona boy. He's not going to cold plunge.
Well, not to sidetrack this, Kelly. It's funny because Southern California, the water's freezing all the time. Like it's always freezing, and I hated going in the water. And my family didn't really know. Like, so what we do is every December, like around Christmas time, we do like cold plunge. Like we jump in the swimming pool. And so
awesome.
this is kind of something we've been doing for the last 10 years. And, everyone jumps in and jumps out because it's like, 50 degrees, 55 degrees. You're like freezing.
Yeah.
so I've been cold plunging. I've been cold plunging for a year. No one really knew. And we go to do the cold plunge at Christmas, and I'm out there swimming for like 6 minutes, and everyone's like, "What?" They're like,
No
"Who are
way.
you?" I'm like, "Well, I've been cold plunging at 40, so 50 is fine. Like, I can stay here for a long time now." But
That's
so now,
hilarious.
when point being is, when I go back to Newport, and even in the winter, like I'll go in the ocean. It's fine, you know.
Yeah, you're like, I got
But so
this.
sorry, I probably should have told you that. But no, but you're dead on from the gym side.
Yeah, and obviously a basketball court,
Yeah,
so
basketball, obviously,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. So anyway, those are just a couple of the things I'd put in your gym.
But see, it just shows like we haven't really spent a ton of time together, but you're very observant, right? And
Yeah,
that's why you're good at what you do.
yeah.
So,
I
so what
try.
keeps you up at what keeps you up at night, Callie?
I was prepared for this. I'm gonna say 10 out of 10 cash flow, just making
Right?
sure it's always there. Cash is king, and it stresses me out, not because I need it. I'm very grateful that my wife works really hard. She works a ton of overtime, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of like I want to ease the burden off of her,
Hmm.
and just make sure like we're good to go with my business. And so cash flow is the thing that stresses me out.
Well, and it's hard too because you're buying a lot of equipment, so there's deposits, maybe paid in full in some cases. So
Yeah,
it's a lot tougher for you than probably other businesses.
yeah, yeah.
What do you do for fun?
This is gonna sound really weird, but we used to surf a lot, and our dog's getting old, so she can't really make it to the beach as much with us anymore. But so we'll go down to like the Back Bay in Newport, and we'll kind of go down this hill here, and there's just like this open area, this open stretch, and we just walk the beach while she kind of swims in the water, and we pick up trash, and it's
Oh,
so
that's amazing.
yeah, it's like so
That's
calming.
actually amazing.
It's like so cathartic, and like we
Yeah.
like let me tell you, when you're walking up this hill with like a haul of like 2 3 bags of
Yeah.
trash, it's like it's like the best feeling. The dog's tired, we're like we've got the sunshine, it's great. So that's what we do for fun.
Well, kudos to you, Kelly. Because the thing is, like, yes, the work outside, and you're doing something very productive, and it's like incredible for the environment. But like, it's sad that you can gather that much in such a pretty place. That's the sad part of it.
Yeah, I know, but I try not to get down on it. I think, hey,
Yeah.
like we're here, we're enjoying it, that's the least we can do.
Well, that's incredible. So, for
Yeah.
those listening, where can they find you?
Beachside Custom Gyms. And I do have a second page at Cali the Contractor. That's more for like, day in the life stuff. But Beachside Custom Gyms is all things gym design and build. So
Well, Callie, you've been incredible. Thank you so much. I know you're busy. Appreciate making time. It was so great having you on.
thank you, Brad. This was awesome.